When you look at Saturn through a telescope for the first time, something breaks inside you, not in a painful way, in the way that happens when you see something so impossible, so perfectly wrong, that your brain refuses to accept it. You've seen photographs, you've read about it, you know it's there. And then you put your eye to the lens, and there it is, a planet with a ring around it. Not a decoration, not a myth, a ring. Solid, real, impossibly there. Most people who discover Saturn in a backyard telescope have the same reaction. They step back, they blink, they look again. Because the human mind evolved to understand objects that are close and small. A ring around a planet is neither. It breaks something fundamental about how we process the world. The rings of Saturn are not a freak of nature. They are not some temporary cosmic accident that will vanish in a few thousand years. Well, actually, they might be temporary, but not in the way you're thinking. That part comes later. For now, just understand this. What you are looking at when you look at Saturn is perhaps the most beautiful object in the entire solar system. And it is made of broken things. Ice, rock, dust, debris. Fragments of a moon that came too close. Or maybe the leftover pieces from when Saturn itself was born. Physicists still debate the origin story, but everyone agrees on one fact. Those rings are real, and they are falling. Yes, falling. This is where most people stop listening. They think Saturn's rings are permanent, eternal, unchanging, a fixture of the solar system for billions of years to come. They are wrong. In perhaps 100 million years, maybe sooner, maybe later, we don't know for certain those rings will be gone. The particles that make them will either crash into Saturn's atmosphere and burn, or drift away into space, or clump together to form a new moon. The ring system will collapse. For a cosmic object, 100 million years is not long. Dinosaurs ruled Earth for 170 million years. The rings of Saturn might disappear in less time than it took for an entire age of reptiles to rise and fall and be buried under layers of rock and time. You are watching the slow death of the most beautiful thing in our cosmic neighborhood. You are watching something that will not exist when your species has evolved beyond recognition, if your species survives that long at all. And right now, in this moment, while you have the chance, those rings are visible. They are there. They are falling, and they are beautiful, and they are almost gone. This is not a metaphor. This is not poetic license. This is what the data tells us. When the Cassini spacecraft fell into Saturn in 2017, before it burned up in the planet's atmosphere, it sent back one final piece of information, a measurement, a number. The rings are losing mass. They are being pulled down into Saturn's gravity well at a rate that suggests they might vanish within a human lifetime, maybe 10 million years from now, maybe 100 million. The math is still uncertain, but the direction is clear. The rings are not permanent. Everything in the universe is temporary. Every mountain will erode to dust. Every star will burn out. Every galaxy will either collide with another or drift so far away that no light from anywhere else will ever reach it. But we don't usually see the temporary nature of things. We live in the brief moment when mountains are mountains, when stars are bright, when we can see other galaxies in the night sky. With Saturn, you can see it. The impermanence. The clock running. The beauty being pulled down, particle by particle, into the gravity of a giant. And the most astonishing part? We know so little. Saturn is right there in our solar system. A 4-hour journey by modern spacecraft. We've sent probes to it, orbited it, measured it, analyzed it, and we still don't fully understand how the rings formed. We still don't know if they are pristine ancient relics from the dawn of the solar system or the recent wreckage of something that was torn to pieces just a few million years ago. We don't even know exactly how fast they're falling. All we know is that they are real. They are made of ice and rock. They are beautiful beyond measure. and they are not going to last. Let that settle for a moment. Let it sit in your chest like a stone. Because to understand what's really happening at Saturn, you have to understand something deeper. You have to understand that beauty in space is not gentle. It is not kind. It is not something that exists for us or for any reason at all. It simply exists, and then it stops. To understand Saturn's rings, we have to understand their size. If you took Earth and placed it on top of Earth, and then added 5 more Earths in a stack, you could fit all of them inside Saturn. Saturn is not a small object. It is a gas giant, a monster world 95 times more massive than Earth, a planet so large that it takes sunlight 79 minutes to reach it from the Sunday. When we say giant, we do not mean large in the way mountains are large. We mean large in the way an ocean is large in the way that emptiness is large. Now imagine a ring around this giant, not a thin line, not a pencil drawn around it. The rings of Saturn extend from about 6,630 kilometers from the planet's center to about 282,000 kilometers. That is a width of nearly 276,000 kilometers. The distance from Earth to the Moon is only 384,400 kilometers. The rings of Saturn are nearly as wide as the entire Earth-Moon distance. But they are not solid. They are not a disk. They are separated into hundreds of individual ringlets, with gaps between them, some of those gaps so thin that they are invisible from Earth. Let that land. The rings of Saturn are nearly the width of the Earth-Moon system. But here is what makes them beautiful, and what makes them temporary, and what makes them one of the most fragile structures in the solar system. They are thin, incredibly thin. If Saturn were the size of a marble, the rings would be thinner than a sheet of paper around it. In some places, they are less than 100 meters thick, thinner than the height of a 30-story building, stretched across a structure the size of a planetary system. The rings are made of trillions of particles. Ice mostly, some rock, some dust. The chunks range in size from grains of sand to chunks the size of mountains. The largest known moonlets in the rings, and moonlets is what scientists call them when they're too big to just be debris, are perhaps a few kilometers across. But most of the ring is not rocks. It is ice, ancient ice. Ice that has been orbiting Saturn for perhaps billions of years, or perhaps only millions. The age of the rings is one of the great unsolved mysteries of planetary science. What we do know is this: the particles in Saturn's rings are moving incredibly fast. At the inner edge of the main rings, particles are orbiting Saturn once every 7 hours. At the outer edge, the orbital period is nearly 15 hours, but both are moving at speeds that would kill any human instantly. The particles are in constant motion, constantly colliding, constantly exchanging energy and momentum. When two particles meet, they do not stick together. They bounce. They slide past each other. Some stick together briefly, forming clumps, which then break apart again. It is chaos, arranged perfectly by the laws of physics. This is where the rings become temporal. This is where the countdown begins. Saturn has many small moons. They move through the ring system, and when they do, their gravity tugs at the particles. These tugs, over millions of years, add up. They nudge particles. They move them. Some particles are moved outward, away from Saturn. Some are moved inward, toward the planet's upper atmosphere. The moons are slowly shepherding the rings to their doom. But there is another force at work, and this one is more subtle, and perhaps more devastating: the Poynting-Robertson effect. Sunlight hits the particles in the rings. The sunlight carries momentum. Yes, light has weight. Not much, but it has weight. When a particle absorbs sunlight and then re-radiates heat, the radiation pushes back slightly harder than the incoming light pushed. This creates a tiny drag force, incomprehensibly tiny. If you wanted to feel this force, you would need to be a grain of ice drifting in the vacuum of space, where there is no air to feel, and even then, you would feel almost nothing. But multiply this incomprehensibly tiny force by trillions of particles, and multiply that by millions of years, and something happens. The particles slowly drift inward. They spiral very, very slowly towards Saturn. Not fast, not even noticeably, but inevitably. It is a slow death. Written in the physics of light, the rings have another enemy, and it is inside them, tidal forces. Saturn is so massive, so gravitationally dominant, that its pull is not evenly distributed. The gravity is stronger on the side of a particle facing Saturn than on the far side. This difference, this gradient, can be strong enough to stretch things apart. If a particle in the rings gets too close to Saturn, the tidal force will rip it to shreds. This is why there is a limit to how close the rings can extend to Saturn. They cannot go closer than a certain distance, called the Roche limit, or they will be torn apart and scattered. But this is not a barrier. It is a boundary. And boundaries can be crossed, slowly, pulled by gravity, dragged by the pointing Robertson effect, nudged by the moons, until finally, inexorably, the particles fall. When they fall, they do not disappear. Some crash into Saturn's atmosphere and burn. Imagine ice particles, fragments the size of mountains, falling through clouds of hydrogen and helium, moving at speeds faster than any sound, compressing the air ahead of them, until it glows, until the particles vaporize, until they become nothing. Energy, heat, light, beautiful and terrible and gone. This is happening right now. As you read this sentence, particles from Saturn's rings are falling. They are falling slowly, but they are falling. In 100 million years, the rings might be gone. That is a blink of an eye in cosmic time. Here is where your perspective inverts. You have spent your entire life in a world of human scale. The Eiffel Tower is tall. The Pacific Ocean is wide. The Earth is big. These are true within the context of Earth. They are the largest things most humans ever see. But Saturn's rings are 276,000 kilometers wide. The Pacific Ocean is about 15,000 kilometers wide. The rings are 18 times wider than the largest ocean on Earth. They are wider than the distance light travels in 1 second. They are wider than the distance from the Earth to the Moon. And they are temporary. A human life is perhaps 80 years. A human civilization has existed for perhaps 10,000 years. A species can last for millions of years. The rings of Saturn might last for 100 million years before they are completely gone. This is 100 times longer than humans have existed. And we are talking about something vanishing. This is the scale of cosmic time. Not tomorrow. Not in a century. But gone. In the time it takes stars to be born and die, the rings will be memory. When NASA's Cassini spacecraft arrived at Saturn in 2004, it began orbiting the planet. For 13 years, it collected data. It took photographs. It measured the particles, analyzed their composition, measured the electromagnetic fields, studied the moons. And with each observation, the picture became clearer and more strange. The rings are not uniform. They have structure, fine lines, patterns, waves that propagate through the rings like ripples on water, except the water is ice particles stretched across 1,000 kilometers, and the ripples take hours to complete. Some of these patterns are created by the moons. Some are caused by the ring's own internal dynamics. Some are mysteriously unexplained. When Cassini sent back images of the ring edges, places where the ring particles are concentrated into tight bands, scientists saw structure so fine, so intricate, that it looked artificial. It looked designed. It did not look like something that should exist in the universe. And yet, there it was. This is the moment where beauty and incomprehensibility meet. You are looking at something that is 100,000 kilometers across, made of trillions of particles, moving at speeds that would kill you instantly, held together by gravity and physics, and it has patterns so fine that it looks like art. But it is not art. It is what happens when you have unimaginable scales, unimaginable time scales, and the simple laws of physics. No artist is required. No intelligence is required. Just mathematics and gravity and the cold indifference of space. The rings will not care that they are beautiful. They will not care that we have come to admire them. They will not care that we launched a spacecraft billions of kilometers to study them, or that we felt awe when we saw their structure revealed. The rings are falling. The gravity is pulling. The light is dragging. The moons are shepherding. And in the time it takes a star to be born and live 1 billion years, they will be gone. This is the weight of it. This is what makes the rings so terrifying and so beautiful. Not that they are big, but that they are temporary. Not that they are far away, but that they are falling toward us, pulling atoms downward, collapsing into nothing. Everything falls in the end. You have been alive for some number of years. In that time, Saturn's rings have fallen closer to the planet by a distance so small that it is impossible to measure without instruments. You will never see them move. You will never notice the change, but the change is happening, always happening. The rings are aging. They are approaching their end state. The universe is moving them toward their conclusion. This is not special to Saturn. Everything is temporary. But with Saturn, we can see it. We can measure it. We can project forward and say, in 100 million years, the rings will be gone. We cannot do this with mountains. We cannot do this with oceans. We cannot do this with ourselves. But with Saturn, the math is clear. The trajectory is simple. The end is written. When you understand this, something shifts in how you see the rings. They become not just beautiful, but tragic. They become something to treasure, because it will not be there forever. They become something that demands our attention now, in this moment, while they still exist. The Cassini spacecraft is gone. Its mission ended in 2017, when it dove into Saturn's atmosphere. That was not an accident. That was a choice made by NASA scientists. They could have sent it away from Saturn, preserved it, left it in space to drift for billions of years. Instead, they sent it down. They sent it into the clouds. They destroyed it deliberately, carefully, making sure it did not crash into any of Saturn's moons and carry Earth bacteria with it. They let it fall. Maybe that was the right choice. Maybe that was the only choice. The spacecraft had used all its fuel. It could not orbit forever. But there is something poetic in it. The spacecraft that came to study Saturn was sent to fall into Saturn. It became part of the system it was measuring. It became part of the temporary beauty. It will burn up in those clouds and be gone. And Saturn's rings, which the spacecraft came to study, will eventually fall the same way. We are made of the same material as Saturn's rings: carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, iron, the heavy elements that form in stars and scatter when stars explode, that clump together to form planets and moons and rings, that somehow, on at least one planet, became aware of themselves. We are made of star stuff. Saturn's rings are made of star stuff. The difference is only in arrangement, in history, in the particular path that matter took as it moved through space and time. When you look at Saturn, you are looking at ancient ice, frozen water that has been drifting in space for perhaps billions of years. That ice came from somewhere. It formed around a star in a cloud of gas and dust. That star might have exploded. That star might have been torn apart by the gravity of a larger star. The pieces scattered. Some of those pieces eventually found their way to Saturn, captured by its gravity, arranged into rings by the laws of orbital mechanics. And now those rings are falling. They are returning to Saturn. The cycle is closing. The ice will become part of Saturn's atmosphere. It will heat up and dissipate. The atoms will separate. They will drift in the wind. Someday, perhaps, they will fall into Saturn's storms, into the giant hurricanes that rage in that planet's atmosphere for centuries. Or they will drift out of Saturn entirely, cast off by some interaction with a moon, sent back into space, drifting outward toward the edges of the solar system or back toward the Sunday, and eventually, over timescales that are almost impossible to comprehend, those atoms might come together again. They might form a new ice particle. They might become part of a comet. They might fall toward Earth. They might become part of an ocean. They might become part of a living thing. You might be made, in part, of the atoms that came from Saturn's rings. This is not mystical thinking. This is atomic physics. The universe does not recycle atoms for poetic reasons. It does so because atoms cannot be created or destroyed. The iron in your blood was forged in a supernova. The carbon in your cells was made in a star's core. The oxygen you breathe was scattered by a stellar explosion. And some of the atoms in your body right now might have been billions of years ago, part of Saturn's rings. You are connected to Saturn, not metaphorically, physically, materially, made of the same stuff, sharing the same cosmic history, and yet you are separate. You are conscious. You are aware. The atoms in Saturn's rings have no awareness. They know nothing of their structure, nothing of their beauty, nothing of the fact that they are falling. They simply fall, governed by laws they cannot understand, arranged by forces they do not know exist. But you know. You have learned. You have sent spacecraft to Saturn. You have seen the rings through telescopes. You have read about the physics. You have stood under a night sky and looked up and thought, somewhere out there, those rings are falling. This is the privilege of consciousness. To see beauty, to understand scale, to know that things end, to feel the weight of time and the immensity of space, and to experience something close to awe. Saturn's rings are made of ice and rock, ancient, beautiful, temporary. They are falling. They will not fall tomorrow. They will not fall in your lifetime. But they are falling, and the knowledge of that fall is now part of your understanding of the universe. The rings will be gone. The ice will dissolve. The structure will collapse. Saturn will remain, unchanged, indifferent. The moons will continue their orbits. The solar system will continue its slow waltz around the galactic core. And somewhere, in a telescope, in a photograph, in a memory, the rings will remain, preserved in light, captured in time, proof that something beautiful once existed and that we were here to see it. You are standing on a planet orbiting a middle-aged star, looking across billions of kilometers of vacuum at rings made of ice and frozen rock that are slowly, inevitably, falling into the gravity of a giant. And you know what that means. You are not lost in space. You are home in a universe that is strange and vast and temporary. And right now, while the rings still exist, that is enough.